Given the towering corruption and aggression that politics invites, from governments and central banks inflating our currency, to taxation, to fascist so-called regulations, to even funding foreign governments, is it possible that an ally and advisor to FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, was part of a direct back-channel communications portal with leftist activists and the White House? Come to think of it, is it possible that relatively speaking, is merely an indication of a much larger problem? Here's the story. Beyond the seemingly ready-made crypto strangling legislation that Senator Liz Warren, the Democrat of Massachusetts, and other Constitution flouters pushed within days of the November 11th FTX bankruptcy announcement, one of the most curious and disturbing facets of the Ukraine-tied, media-adored, and now collapsed cryptocurrency exchange has actually just come to light. On December 22nd, Politico's Ryan Lizza, Rachel Bade, and Eugene Daniels reported that a close ally and advisor to FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, was part of a direct back-channel communications portal with leftist activists and the White House. And curiously, the members of that FTX White House leftist activist portal appear to have shut it down the day after FTX filed for bankruptcy. The figure involved with the controversy is named Sean McElwee, who, as Politico reports, quote, in 2018 founded Data for Progress, DFP, a progressive think tank with an emphasis on influencing public policy through polling, end quote. Because, you know, polling, nothing like a push poll. I worked at a polling place in 1989. I saw them do it. It was very interesting. You know, if the name Data for Progress evokes thoughts of another organization, the John Podesta created Center for American Progress, CAP, and its George Soros-funded political action group, the Center for American Progress Action Fund, that's CAP Action, well, that is possible, because McElwee is said to have become connected with Bankman-Fried via mutual friend and leftist data guru David Shor, who is a senior fellow with the Center for American Progress. According to Politico, quote, more recently, McElwee became a close political ally and advisor to FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried. They were connected through Shore, according to a friend of both men, end quote. I love how they have no attribution on any of this stuff. It's all, well, according to sources. Okay. Electricity sources? Will those be coal plants, natural gas plants? Why is this significant? Quote, McElwee had easy access to the White House and the press, and he made sure that they had access to him. He kept an open Slack channel at DFP that became a rolling conversation between McElwee, Biden administration officials, and some well-known reporters, a kind of journalist for the early 2020s, end quote. Which, of course, looks eerily like the easy access that the feds, from the FBI to the DHS to the CIA, had to censorious leftists working at Twitter. And that might make one pause to wonder how well-known reporters, as they put it, can be so closely involved with heretofore non-public communications channels that not only are tied to left-wing so-called influencers like McElwee, but to Biden officials and to Bankman-Fried. And of course, by extension, to the data maestro, CAP senior fellow, Mr. Shore, all of whom have vested interests in steering public policy and steering the reporting on public policy. And, of course, there is yet another facet of this how strange it is category to mention. The Politico team notes, quote, on November 12th, the day after FTX filed for bankruptcy and SBF, that's Bankman-Fried, resigned as CEO, McAfee abruptly shuttered the Slack channel. 6 days later, he and Data for Progress began negotiating his exit from the firm he had built, end quote. Whoops. Adds the Politico trio, quote, then on December 13th, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York unsealed an 8-count indictment against SBF. The first 7 counts, which were about financial crimes, garnered the most attention. But it was the 8th count that turned heads in Washington, alleging a straw donor scheme in which SBF, Bankman-Fried, funneled corporate money to candidates and committees through third parties. And SDNY, that's the Southern District of New York, alleged that SBF had help. SBF and, quote, others known and unknown, end quote, the indictment says, made contributions, quote, in the names of other persons, end interior quote, end quote. And of course, as I reported on December 19th, quote, it appears as if a large portion of Bankman-Fried's unbalanced FTX ledger was funded via the U.S. subsidized government of Ukraine. And that facilitated Sammy's $40 million in campaign contributions to Democrats, making him the second biggest donor to the Dems in the 2021-2022 cycle, behind the all-enlightened George Soros and ahead of Michael Ban the Guns Bloomberg. And it does seem odd that once the election was over, FTX suddenly got exposed for all this alleged fraud, end quote. So adding straw donations to the indictments might make a lot of sense. And is there merit to wonder if any of these participants in these back-channel communications were tied to the straw donations mentioned in that 8th indictment? The Politico does engage in speculation, but only provides unnamed sources to back it up. Quote, in the race to figure out who might have helped SBF make straw donations, McAfee's name was at the top of the list. The leadership at DFP suddenly feared they could be in the middle of a much bigger scandal. Nobody at DFP makes more than $200,000 a year, yet several employees who worked for McAfee made thousands of dollars in campaign contributions in 2022. One employee, Ethan Winter, DFP's lead analyst, made nearly $31,000 in donations, which a source at DFP said was more than a quarter of his salary. On Tuesday morning, David Friedlander reported in New York Magazine that McAfee had pressured a DFP employee to be a straw donor. On Wednesday, sources at DFP identified Winter as that employee and told us that he had resigned. Winter's resignation was first reported by CNBC, otherwise known as CBDC-NBC. Whether this triggers American umbrage remains to be seen. Also remaining is whether a few more Americans will stir from their long slumber of ignorance about the fact that the uniparty in D.C., that being both Democrats and Republicans on the whole, for more than a decade has engaged in a towering hegemonic attack on the U.S. Constitution and U.S. taxpayers, particularly when it comes to Ukraine, one of the major sources of FTX funds. Since February, the U.S. government has flouted the Constitution to toss Ukraine over $100 billion in financial and military aid. That's nearly half of the Ukrainian gross domestic product for 2021. And this widely seen so-called aid serves only as the frosting on a deeply layered cake of U.S. spending and influence going back to Secretary of State James Baker's hollow 1999 assurance to Russia that NATO membership would not expand the North Atlantic Treaty Organization membership and influence to Ukraine. Atop that corrupt foundation, we witnessed then-Senator Barack Obama's 2005 move to fund Ukrainian bio-research labs and keep running extant labs there rather than shutting them down. Atop that came the late 2013, early 2014 U.S.-influenced regime change in Ukraine, culminating in the ouster of the re-elected president Viktor Yanukovych. And of course, with the insertion of a new Ukrainian government that followed the stated blueprint of then Assistant Secretary of State to the EU Victoria Nuland and U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Pyatt.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay.
And then that soon saw U.S. Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter, placed on the board of directors of Ukraine's biggest government-run energy corporation, Burisma, and saw the Ukraine government wreak havoc in the Donbass region. Many, many deaths prior to all of what we've been seeing recently between Russia and Ukraine. Somehow that slipped through and was not seen by the pop media. So, what is to be the source of American outrage? Will it be this new revelation? Will fresh American anger stem from the hints or evidence of political influence peddling and corruption? Or will it stem from seeing the deeper corruption hiding behind all of this? The deeper problem that exists regardless of SBFs and the FTXs of the world. That corruption is the prevailing DC disregard for constitutional oaths that sees the President of the United States and Congress send our money and U.S. arms and intelligence and expertise to people in foreign lands in order to engage in war by proxy. Moral outrage is due, and it's been long overdue. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Please keep in mind that if you watch us on Rumble, they don't censor us there. So we'd love to see you there. We'll see you subscribing, hopefully, and we'll see you hit that plus button because that helps us within the algorithms. More people can see the videos. We'll also see you on YouTube where, yes, they do censor us.